Naked and Afraid, Part 1. Hi, I'm Kathy Marie, and this is Shifting the Tide TV. I'm coming to you today from Rio Baru, which is the river here in Dominical, Costa Rica. If you see any bugs flying by and I have to swat at them, don't mind that. You may see some pretty birds or hear some squawking in the background. I live right by the jungle here near the beach, and so I wanted to bring you an outdoor beautiful video today for our Naked and Afraid Part 1. There are parts 2 and 3 coming, so keep your eyes peeled for that, and let's get started. So I want to give you a little bit of background about my Naked and Afraid experience. Starting at the very beginning. This will be brief. Grew up with poor parents. My mother used to say they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. My bassinet as a baby was a drawer from a dresser with a blanket in it. I was a really tiny baby, so it worked for a couple of months actually. But we rose to middle class and had it really nice when I was middle ages, maybe 10, 11 to when I got married at 20. But I got married and had a baby at 21 and had 3 more children because I was trusting God to plan my family. That was my religious belief at the time. And I wasn't working. I stayed at home. I homeschooled my children, so money issues always were there. Fortunately, I was a great money manager, but I always had lack. There was lack. I wasn't living in abundance. It was always pinching pennies. And by the time I was, let's say in my late 40s, I had had enough. And at the same time, I read The Secret. Sure, a lot of you have read The Secret or The Law of Attraction. I started with the positive affirmations. That's how I started to shift my life. I would walk around the house saying things like, I'm young, hip, thin, rich, and beautiful, after I had watched a movie called The Last Holiday with Queen Latifah in it. There was a scene where the motivational book was called Young, Hip, and Rich, so I made my own mantra and I would go around saying it all day long, and my husband and my daughter would laugh at me. Well, within a year, I created the health. I lost weight. I was 25 pounds overweight and I was thin again. I was fit and I had a good job. I found a job that was much to my liking. I was happy with it. I was helping people. I was a recruiter for a post-secondary school, and it gave me so much satisfaction to help people change their lives by getting an education. So life was getting better. I was creating abundance. I was creating joy, and I was creating more money. Then I went through a divorce at 51, and I was by myself. I was fine. I was taking care of myself, but I thought, there's more to this. Now I have nobody bringing me down. My husband had been in a depression for 4 years, so that was tough to go through. And now I could create my own destiny. So I decided I'm going to start a new mantra, a new positive affirmation. I'm worth 6 figures, and I'm going to figure out how to make this happen. Not the details so much, but I knew there was a way. So I started saying it every day. I'm worth 6 figures. I'm worth 6 figures. I'm worth 6 figures. And I created a commission-only job in an employment recruiting firm, and I doubled my income that first year. I was on cloud 9, guys. I was living in Albuquerque. I did not quite hit the 6 figures the first year, but I almost hit it, and boy, was I excited. I was wealthy for the first time in my life. So that went on for a couple of years, and then I took a chance on something different. It didn't work out. Moved to Boulder, Colorado, because I had a non-compete, and I took another recruiting job where for the first 6 months, my chest hurt every single day. I was so stressed. But within that first year, I again succeeded. I was able to hire an assistant, and my chest quit hurting when I hired the assistant. And then I thought I had the charmed life. I was earning way more than I had earned before. I actually more than quadrupled my first income, and I was dating somebody. I had a beautiful home to live in Boulder, Colorado. I was enjoying the mountains and nature. I was having the time of my life. Then things changed again. Not right away, but the owner wanted to grow the business, and there were two of us recruiting. One of us was on one side of the business and the other had a different part of the industry. We each had the whole United States, and he wanted to divide it up into 3 parts, which I knew wasn't going to be a real good idea. The industry was small and we had competition, and we worked with startups quite a bit, so there weren't a whole lot of companies to work with. And long story short, on that end of the spectrum, when he did that and hired more recruiters, it basically crashed both of our businesses. We had both just bought houses in Boulder, the Boulder area, and we both were reduced to starting from scratch and making no money. I had just bought a townhome. I remodeled the upper part of the townhome. I was planning to pay cash for that. And in January of 2017, my income went from a lot to nothing. Nothing, overnight. January, no income. February, no income. March, no income. Guys, I was afraid. I was freaking out. I had started doing the energy work and learning about a lot of learning tools on how to manifest, how to use my creative feminine energy, how to get rid of my negativity and all of my lower vibrations. But I was no expert at this stuff, and I was just learning. So I was doing the best I could, but boy, was I scared. The fear was really coming up. All of my survival issues were coming up. All of my insecurities, fear, 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 trauma, trauma, trauma. I was doing the best I could, but boy, was I afraid. But not yet naked. I was stripping down, but not yet naked. So, the beginning of April, I felt like things were going to turn around. I had some new searches that were supposed to start soon, and I was heading off to the trip in Mexico, the awards trip that I had earned with my daughter, and I just knew everything was going to get better after that trip, that these searches were going to start, and they weren't the greatest searches, but they were, something I could start making some money, and I had a lot more people to call within the next 2 months, and things would be better. I went on the trip, and I went to the awards ceremony, and I knew I was in the top 10, but I didn't know where. They kept it a secret. The company kept it a secret. I went in there. I wasn't number 3. I wasn't number 2. I was number 1. I was the number 1 recruiter in my franchise, in the world. And when I walked up there to get my award, I wasn't even happy because I hadn't made a dime other than my draw for 3 months. And I knew I wasn't going to make anything in April either. And that was scary. I was scared out of my mind, and I had just won the award for the top recruiter in the world. It was not a good night. I should have been able to enjoy myself. I'd finally risen to the top, not only of my career, but also of earning power, and the sky was the limit before my whole territory was cut by 2/3. So I get home and get Montezumas Revenge. Gotta love Mexico. It's beautiful, but don't drink the water. I didn't drink the water either. I didn't even brush my teeth with it, but obviously I got some of it in me. So I was sick. I could barely work on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, there was an hour-long meeting on my calendar. This didn't look good. I knew something was up. I went into the meeting, and the owner of the company said to me, "If you don't work 11-hour days, you don't have a job." I mean, this came out within the first 2 minutes I was sitting in the room. I went into shock. I just bought a house. I just remodeled it. I was going to pay cash for the remodel. I had a big house payment. There was no way I was going to be able to survive long. I had savings, but what am I going to do? I can't work 11-hour days, and I had 50 people in my database to call. And there were only 300 and actually there were only about 250 to call. And I couldn't call the rest of them for about a month and a half, 2 months without really bugging them. So I expressed my concerns and I told him I can't work 11-hour days and what would I do anyway? And he didn't care. He didn't care. Now I'm really being stripped down. Now I'm naked. This was a big transition point for me. I walked out of that office in shock. I got my first and only parking ticket in Boulder that day because I drove downtown to Pearl Street, where my school was, where I could go meditate in a safe place. And I didn't even pay the parking meter. I was out of my body. I was not even there. I walked into the school knowing something good will come of this. Something good will come of this. But I was naked and I was afraid. I didn't quit or get fired that day. He told me take the rest of the week off, which I was thinking, what good will that do? That's just going to put me behind another week if I do decide to stay, which I knew I couldn't or wouldn't. Every time I would think about doing that for 10 years so that I could do what I really wanted to do someday, I would be anxious and sick. I knew that it wasn't what I was meant to do with my life, but what else could I do? I had finally gotten somewhere. I had finally created a life for myself. I had finally achieved everything I wanted to achieve, at least what I knew I wanted at that point in time. So here I am, naked, afraid, and now in shock. I walked into the school. One of the directors graciously helped me center myself and stabilize and ground myself to get me back into my body. And I sat there that day and I drew my life goal. I drew a bubble with everything I wanted in it. And what I wanted is exactly what I'm doing now. There's more to it, but it's sharing spiritual truth with people like you. It includes a lot more details and a lot more to come. This is just the beginning. And it was also living at a beach, but I didn't know when or how any of that was going to happen back then. I was just naked and very, very afraid. So over those next few days, I used the tools that I had learned to blow energy. It triggered everything from my first husband. You know, I raised our children, I homeschooled my children, I kept a beautiful home. I cooked fabulous homemade organic meals every day. I ran all the finances. And when we got divorced after 15 years of abuse, he just let me go like I was worth nothing. And then my second husband was depressed for 4 years before we divorced, and he let me go like I was worth nothing. And here I was, the top recruiter in the world, and the man that I worked for let me go like I was worth nothing. Talk about bringing up the garbage. Well, I knew how to blow energy. I knew how to blow energy. And I was blowing energy like crazy. I was pulling out all that trauma, pulling out all the hurt, all the grief, all the loss. And I did a lot of work on myself that week. By Sunday, I knew I was going to tell the owner that I couldn't do it. I couldn't work 11 hours. So I asked him to please cancel my contract and allow me to get unemployment, because even that wouldn't pay my house payment, but at least it would keep me going for a little while. And he graciously did that. He allowed me to get unemployment. And I told him, you know, we've just gone in different directions. You want to grow the business. You want a more corporate atmosphere. I want freedom. I want to be able to call my own shots, which is part of why I loved that job at the beginning. I was able to do things the way I love to do them. I was free, and my freedom had been taken away, and now more of it was being taken away. And we parted ways, and I still couldn't see what was going to happen. I was naked, I was afraid, I was still in shock for about 3 weeks, but I knew something was going to shift. And that was the beginning of my transition. So tune in for Naked and Afraid, Part 2. I can't wait to continue this story with you. Pura vida! Have a beautiful day. Mwah. Love and light.